Uh, Thank you so much. Much applause for this amazing event. I'm so happy to have been able to see it. Let me begin the discussion by introducing each of you a little bit more. First, Hamid Rahmanian is a New York-based Iranian multidisciplinary artist, mostly working in cinema, graphic art, and shadow theater. Since the late 80s, he has combined his love with traditional Persian art forms with modern technology to create new works of art that visually bridge the gaps of East and West. As a storyteller, his works have focused on people and issues that are rarely covered in the mainstream media, offering audiences new perspectives and intimate glimpses into otherwise little-known worlds. His latest production, Song of the North, continues his exploration of Persian epic via shadow theater and has been met with acclaim in Paris, New York, and Colombia. And we have to add features 5 University of Connecticut School of Fine Arts and Puppet Arts alumni who've played important roles in that. Olga M. Davidson received her PhD in 1983 from Princeton University in Near Eastern Studies and is on the faculty of the Institute for the Study of Muslim Societies and Civilizations at Boston University, where she's been a research fellow since 2009. From 1992 to 1997, she was chair of the concentration in Islamic and Middle Eastern Studies at Brandeis University. And since 1999, she has been the chair of the board of the ILEX, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Foundation. She's the author of Poet and Hero in the Persian Book of Kings, which is, of course, the Shahnameh, and Comparative Literature and Classical Persian Poetry, both of which have been translated into Persian and distributed in Iran. And we thought we'd just start with Professor Davidson to begin this discussion with Hamid about Feathers of Fire and his amazing work with epic and puppetry. Olga, please.
First, I'd love to say to Hamid that I've always enjoyed this enormously because he's taken the story, the ingredients basically of the most important hero in the Shahnameh, that being Rustam. And the idea of Rustam, when you have the idea first of Zal and Rudabeh coming together, was, as is emphasized in this, met with a great deal of discomfort because of their situation. So basically, it was described as what to expect with someone who was raised as a bird and someone who descends from a snake, and it all bodes well. So they get married. What's fun about this is that I really love the headdresses. And I like Mehrab's headdress because Mehrab Zahak is a 3-headed monster. He is somebody who was kissed on the shoulders by the devil, and snakes grew out of him. So he became a 3-headed monster, which is very common in Indo-European mythic figures. And he basically doesn't die. He's bound up till the end of time. But he was defeated by Feridun. But these, I'm getting sort of tied up in the weeds of the Shahnameh. But just to say what the Shahnameh is the Persian national epic. It's about the succession of kings from the beginning of time up through the Arab conquest. There are 50 dynasties it goes through, 50 kingships it goes through. And Rustam and Manuchihr, they come in around the end of the beginning of the second volume, end of the first volume. It's a very long epic. Some editions have it at 60,000 couplets, some at 40,000 couplets, some more. And it is longer than the Iliad and the Odyssey, 3 times longer than the Iliad and the Odyssey combined. So it's a long epic. And Hamid has many stories that he can make. I'm glad he's doing Bijan and Manije on, because it's another great moment, still in Rustam's lifetime. And Rustam basically is a hero that kind of lasts for about 500 years, but he's always very young. He's always described as being very young. What I thought was very interesting, what you've done, Hamid, is you make references into Rustam's future life when you look at someone like Sam, because you spend a lot of time on Sam, and the Shahnameh doesn't. He's just there, but you really spend more of your time on Zal and this courtship with Rudabe. But what I really liked is when you had the idea that when he wakes up and realizes that he's so cursed and it's such a terrible thing that he's done. And then you have that one phrase that even animals know who they take better care of their children. And that is the words that Tahmine uses on Rostam, when Rostam, which is left out in this one, Rostam comes across as a really nice guy, but spoiler alert, he kills his own son. And Tahmine, who's the mother of the child, has this fabulous lament that is often left out of the Shahnameh because it's so subversive, makes Rustam look so bad, when she says even animals can recognize their own. And you have the innocence, as little did he know that you looking for his father. What does his father do? Take his dagger and put it right in his navel and carve it out. So it's very dramatic. But you paid tribute to that, which I thought was really brilliant. The other thing which I really liked, and what you've done, is you played with, because Ruta Bey is, she's a little, she's perky. She's tied up. She sort of is always up in a tower. And she sends her handmaidens out to go check out Zal. So you played with that by having them be kind of, he's not good enough for you. But she does send him out in the Shahnameh to check out who he is. And then she does a Rapunzel act by asking him, inviting him to climb up his hair and hang out in her bedroom. And that's when she gets caught. But even in the Shahnameh, even in all the illuminations of the Shahnameh, they never actually have a picture of Zal climbing up the hair, unlike Rapunzel. When I was a kid, I'd always get rather traumatized by thinking about poor Rapunzel having people climb up her hair. So I'll leave it at that, but I absolutely love what you've done. I think it's brilliant. Oh, I want to say one other thing, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. When you do the nature in the background of the leaves and all the stuff and the clouds, it's so much what you see in the miniatures, but they're so dramatic and vivid. It really makes me happy to see that.
Thank you.
So Mubarak Boshe is back.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Olga. So, do I have a microphone now?
Yes, you've got the microphone now.
No. That's I can start now. Thanks for everyone to watch and watching this show. For me, I watched the beginning, and because I'm last 3 years I'm involved in making Song of the North, and Song of the North is very elaborated. And I was looking at this. I said to myself that, wow, this is kind of primitive compared to what we are doing right now, but I can see how we sort of learn the experience and the technique and how we actually perfected to become the current show. About the mask, first I learned that technique of mask making from my mentor Larry Reed. So that was he and his few of, I think, his Balinese friends in Bali, in mid-90s, they developed this kind of heads pieces there, which is really fascinating because it turns the human into puppets, and it's brilliant. So yeah, but in terms of designing of it, like for instance, each character had different design. Like Sam had this lion on his headdress, which was kind of like reference to later on to his grandchild Rostam, who's also wearing this archetype outfit of having a headdress of the tiger. And in that case that you mentioned, Olga, it's for the Mehrab, because Mehrab came from the family of the Serpent King, and they were sort of. I thought this is a nice and cool reference to his lineage. So I add these snakes on the top of his headdress, and so on. Like for instance, Rudabe is based on the headdress from the Zandia era, which was almost like mid 17th, early 18th century. Yeah, these are all everything. All the courtiers. For instance, the vizier, they came to the king's court. The soothsayer, they are all their faces or their outfits is based on, for instance, in that case, based on some Sassanid coin from around 1600 years ago, and so on. It's my emphasis is to bring and introduce the audience to the whole new sets of visuals, to create a sort of a plot that they feel that they are in the Eastern world, rather than being more like what you have in America, much Eurocentric sort of approach. And the visual you see, it's more goes through that filtration. So I thought I can actually bring these visuals to the sort of made them visible. And also in my current show, I made it even more closer what we had in the coins or the sculptures or the stone carvings are very similar to that. So yeah, and the backgrounds that you mentioned, I try to use as much as possible the elements of miniatures incorporated into the background design. Yeah, it's we have a huge vocabulary in our visual tradition that is not being really explored in the Western world, and it has a lot of space, and it feels that you need that visual to create a fresh look. And also the story, we're sitting on a lot of treasures in Persian culture, beautiful stories, and I use Shahnameh actually as a vehicle to carry that visual tradition. So that was intentional, and it was a kind of like a vision that we had from the day first we start with the book, actually, at the beginning, because the Feathers of Fire is part of the much larger projects, which start from the translation and illustration of the new edition of the Shahnameh, and make it accessible to the sort of regular audience, not just academia.
Hamid, did you want to share some of the backstage footage
yes,
of the
actually,
show?
I wanted to share some of the backstage for the audience to see actually a little bit glimpse of how we perform, actually. So you don't see this part. The audience sits the other side of this screen, which is the 30 by 15 feet tall. And this is the scene that about the plot, that the nightmare, the Psalms had a nightmare that just also Olga mentioned. So let's look at it to see how we. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3,
Son to the beasts of the wild. A magical creature is raising him. Have you no shame?
Send for my soothsayer.
O great soul, you have committed a grave sin. The magnificent Simorg has taken pity on your son and is raising him as her own. It is your duty to bring him back from the wild and restore him to his rightful place.
Anyway,
Amazing.
I think so. This is just a glimpse of how the show it looks like from the other angle. It's a very physical, actually, theater, but what you see is just a reflection of all these activities. Yeah.
I think seeing this backstage view brings to my mind tons of questions, but I wonder if we might want to look at some of the questions posted by the attendees.
One of the questions is the dance question, actually, from Bonnie.
From Bonnie Piriali. Did the performers study dance, particularly Persian historical dance, to be able to move in meaningful ways for this production?
There was actually Rudabe was Iranian lady, so that's why she actually reborn, is in our gene. So they know how to move. Yes, that the one who's dancing, and also Zol, who was actually a Filipino wonderful actor and puppeteer. So no, she actually learned from the Dina to how to move. Yes. What else?
And then
Those are total wedding dance moves.
Huh?
Those are total wedding
Yeah,
dance
dance
moves. I loved it.
Trudy Cohen asks, are the voices performed live or is everything pre-recorded?
Yeah, everything pre-recorded. In this kind of theater, actually, it's because it's very precise. Everything is done before.
Mm-hmm.
You start with the storyboard, very detailed storyboard, and then timing it. And also in the storyboard, you know which puppet goes where in the right line and the right green light or red light. So those are all being calculated before, and then based on that, they recorded. The sound design, music is all basically done before you get into the stage.
I was going to ask. There's so many different elements in this. The animation, the shadow masks, which I think is an innovation from Larry Reed. The shadow puppets, the music, the text, all these different complicated technical aspects with lighting sources switching in and out, and the scale, things change scale in amazing ways, and voices. So I'm understanding you to say that you figure that all out beforehand while you're doing the storyboards.
And also some of this stuff is happening while we were rehearsing, because this is actually the first time this technique is performed this way. So it was a lot of unknown. We had to resolve all these pieces of puzzle. We had to figure out how to put it together. Which I learned that for my new show. So we made it much more elaborated. This is when I'm looking at this, is truly is like a picnic compared to the new
Amazing.
one. So we figured out all this stuff. One of the most complicated one is like some of the big puppets, where they had to be located in the right, so the puppeteer doesn't need to constantly change it when you're changing the scene. So it has to be somehow, the scenery has to be equally go back and forth, so that puppet always sits on the, for instance, right side or the left side. So those are very, it was a fun challenge, but very labor intensive.
Danielle Morales asks, what intrigued you to tell these historical tales using this shadow and light medium?
Yeah, a good question. I'm by background, I'm a graphic designer, and also I made movies. I made 5 films, feature-length, animation, documentaries. And I had always also fascination for the silhouettes. In my graphic design, I use a lot of silhouettes. And I got introduction to work of Lotte Reiniger. And then the Lotte was a source of inspiration. I thought, with all these visuals that I have, I can do something like what she did at, for instance, The Adventure of Prince Ahmed. And that was like a starting point in learning. And then I read an article from the scholar at the University of Edinburgh. His name is Alian George, I believe. he has this paper, and he argues that the art of shadow theater, actually from like 10th century to 13th century, the common genre of Muslim society, entertainment of Muslim society, was shadow theater. And he was arguing about the shadow theater in the Egypt, in the Turkey, Iran, and somehow he says, you know, that according to him, that a lot of mysticism around the shadow theater that you're right now is very prevalent in Bali and Java is actually through the Silk Road. It went from this area to the east, and then mixed with the Chinese tradition, and it creates its own thing. It's fascinating kind of academic discussion about this. So my understanding was, because in early Islam and those fanatics that you could not actually depict the face, I thought maybe shadow theater would be a kind of like a loophole in the law. So you're not actually, you're telling the story with the human figure, but it's all shadows, like a very mysterious. So that's why probably, and then on 13th century, I think what's happened, the art of shadow theater, because of the Mughal king came to Iran, and then they commissioned a lot of illustrator and trained a lot of illustrator to actually depict Shahnameh. So the shadow theater lost its glory to book illustrations. So that's now they can tell the story through books and these manuscripts, and also the emphasis on giving to the art of writing and calligraphy. That's which is another topic of conversation. But yeah, and then it's basically in Iran, it's this art form is just lost for 1,000 years till Feathers of Fire came into place.
Amazing.
Hamid, do people do sahibazi in birthday parties?
Not much, no.
Not much.
We have more khayme shabazi, not sahibazi. Sahibazi is a lost form in Iran.
Is that something? Because, you know, because you have the karagus and or karagusa in Greece.
Yeah.
And so that's the same thing.
Turkey, yes.
That's very elaborate, but it's also very political.
Yeah. So yes, there is no shadow theater practicing in Iran. There was a lot of poems about it in like 2nd century, 3rd century, but there are no actually evidence how they perform and what the technique was with. Yeah.
There's a question here from Ayhan Hulagu, who practices Turkish Karagos shadow theater. He says, how long does it take to rehearse with the actors?
Yeah, so this show, it took around 1.5 years to prepare it, and 2.5 months of everyday practice, except weekend, of course. Yeah, and which was my current show was 12 weeks of practice, which was, you know, way more complicated. So, but yeah, it takes a long time. You know what's the challenge is actually how to bring all these hundreds of puppets in the middle of the stage and clean it and go somewhere else. Right. That's a big, huge choreography that you're not, is not even visible, any of it. And then you come, and then once you figure it out where each puppet should be at any moment, and then you go next step, start choreographing and finding out, okay, where the character should stand in terms of the light and what kind of line, because also when you're writing it, you write certain words to be in a motivation for the character to leave the stage so we can cut to the other light. So everything basically based on this limitation of the physics of light, even the storytelling of it is influenced by that. So you have to know how to move the character out of the screen or different point in the stage so the light doesn't collide to each other, so you don't cast a shadow for the following light. Yeah,
we're actually getting to the end of this very short discussion. So I wanted to ask Olga if she had more thoughts or questions, especially thinking of your expertise in epic and in the Persian epic Shahnameh.
I think what you've done, which I really like, is that I've always think of the illustrations to the Shahnameh is something that you use to you even have them in khanes where you can tell the story, or you have a Naqali telling the story and the reenacting of the story. But I always thought that the beauty of the manuscripts, it was very prestigious to have a beautiful manuscript, was kind of an aid memoir. And then you have the idea, which I've always noticed that there are a little bit of Kalila with Dimna references sometimes in the frames of the Shahnamehs, but of the illustrations. But one thing which I really do think is that I find that it's the epic is very performative, and it's, you know, it's the reception that really matters, and the performance of epic that really matters. And what I love what you've done here is that you've basically taken the beauty of the illustrations and made it performative in and of itself. And and it's not a cartoon. This makes it so much more beautiful. I mean, making it a cute cartoon or something like that is one thing, but how you've done it, you brought to life the absolute beauty and thrill of someone's first seeing an illustration of the Shahnameh. So that is one of the reasons I am your biggest fan.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Great. Akko, we have a question asking, are you using the same pre-recorded audio technique in your new show? Which
yeah, because you know, we cannot perform live because the whole logistics and the requirement for a stage it changes, you know, and also you have to understand, like, these characters, if they want to go live, you have to have a microphone, and all these actors also puppeteers. So the movement behind this screen is a lot, so you can constantly have mic. So it's all pre-recorded. And already it's so labor intensive. Imagine they also wants to perform the line right on the spot.
But you are going live because if the puppets are live.
Yeah. Now, not only that, but also let me add this. The way that this show started, we discovered there's a program called QLab that actually does all the Q. Like in this show, we have exactly 1,136 cues. Which that guy in the center sitting, he's the one who actually performed all the cues, like sound, music, the sound effects, the lights, all those are all manual. So in my new show, we learned to actually combine it to make it more, basically more smooth. But this one, Feathers of Fire, because we were just learning this technique, it was very manual. So it's totally live, you're right. But the voices was recorded.
But that's moot, because it's the visuals that matter so much. And that's the thing. And that's what, and you know it's live each time. You know that you just feel the artisticness and the excitement is palpable because you know that this is a performance.
Yeah, every night actually show would change almost 2 minutes,
Exactly.
shorter or longer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was
amazing. Well, we're kind of at the end of our discussion period here, although I feel like we're just starting to think about this. So maybe we could do that again sometime. In fact, we're kind of hoping that your new production, Song of the North, might come to the University of Connecticut at some point. And if that happens, the Jorgensen Performing Arts Center, we're hoping. And if that happens, we could do another forum and invite you both back.
Yeah,
I'll be there very happily.
That's very fun. And audience, also they can go to kingorama.com and they can actually see my new production, other part of the show. Read about Shahnameh. You know, they can see a lot of material from Feathers of Fire. Yeah.
And world's most beautiful collection of pop-up books.
Yeah.
Yes.
Shahnameh themed pop-up books.
Yeah, we had the Zahak pop-up book. So, but you know, I'm planning for the future to have all the stories somehow in a different form to present it in a more accessible way to the regular audience.
Well, thank you for bringing this extremely rich work of yours that's so amazing to see, and thank you, Olga, for helping us understand better what it's doing and how it's connecting to this great work of epic literature. I wanted to mention that the next installment in this series is next Wednesday, May 18th at 7 p.m. with an online screening, World Epics in Puppetry Japan, excuse me, with an online screening of The Departure and Death of Atsumori, followed by a discussion with Koryu Nishikawa, the fifth puppeteer, in conversation with our friend Claudia Orenstein from Hunter College and Elizabeth Euler from the University of Pittsburgh. And then, excuse me, again on Wednesday, May 25th, World Epics in Puppetry India will feature a screening of About Ram, followed by a discussion with Anurupa Roy from the Katkatha Puppet Arts Trust in India, together with Paula Richmond from Oberlin College. So those things are happening. I did want to mention tomorrow night we're having a discussion about a different subject, Tito Matos and Puerto Rican culture. That's an online forum that'll take place tomorrow at 7. So thank you so much. This is extraordinary, thrilling, deeply moving, a lot to think about, and I hope that we can learn more and watch your shows and think more about this. It's so amazing. And thank you, Olga, too, for shedding so much light on this. And thanks everybody for coming, and thank you, my colleague Emily Wicks, for working backstage to make it happen. So thank you, thanks everybody.
Yeah,
Shabbat shalom b'cheir.
Shabbat shalom b'cheir. Bye-bye.